Hello, and welcome to my cellar for the 174th consecutively numbered time. Whatever that means. Bunch of them. Let's see, what do we got going? Well, I've fallen down the Black Sea's hole even farther. I've gotten the decks and the guns and the carriages and some of the bright work all painted. Then comes the hulls and the mass, and then the new ones that I already ordered, and the first rater that somebody's ordered and giving to me. So I think I'll be painting these things all summer long. All right, let's get to the questions and the comments. Did you get the chance to meet Bob Bledsaw or Bill Owen of the Judges Guild? Did they game with members of TSR? I certainly remember meeting Bob on a couple, 3 occasions. I don't remember Bill Owen, and Bill, if you're still alive, and we did meet, I'm sorry, too many years ago. To my knowledge, these guys never gamed with us, as in that they didn't come up and play at TSR. Okay, next one. I need some advice. With your experience, I'm hoping you've run into a similar problem. One of my players is very bossy and always tries to tell the other players what they do. If they don't listen to him, he gets whiny. Other than this, he's a good guy and a good friend. What should I do? Well, I might reassess that good guy, good friend part. Is this like a Jekyll and Hyde thing? Normally he's just an okay dude, but you sit down and start rolling dice and he becomes a dick. Then you might, if he is a good friend, on a one-on-one sometime away from the group, say, hey, what's it, and just come out and say what's up. Normally we get around great, but then you get in and you think you should tell everybody what to do. There's another way you can handle it. If he doesn't have the highest intelligence or the highest wisdom in the group, when he starts making directions, I'd point that out and defer, physically, literally defer to the highest intelligence or wisdom, whichever is, applicable in the circumstance, and point out that he isn't the smartest guy in the group, perhaps. Now, if he does have the highest numbers, then you just got to say, look, you can continue to be a dick, or you can let everybody else have a good time too, because you're trying to dominate the thing and let everybody else make their own mistakes. And if he just can't get over that after, talking to him about it, well, then you can always point out that the alternative is everybody else is not enjoying playing with you, and that being the case, you're one of many, and I have to go with the wishes of the many. I hope it doesn't come to that, but some people can only play a certain way. It's the only way they know how. Maybe they just need more guidance on role-playing and give up the role of being the party dick. Then a little tongue-in-cheek. Congratulations on the last episode. It was shorter than the last one by roughly 20 seconds. Well, I'm working on it. This one might even be shorter tonight. We don't know. I don't know. It's mostly ad-lib. I cut and paste the questions. I subconsciously think about them for a very short period of time, and then I start talking. So, I set out to be brief, and sometimes the topic intrigues me, and I expound. Some people tune in for that. I'm not sure why, but... Of course, I had to try the dragon fruit Crimson Cow, and don't want to give anybody a free plug unless they're going to sponsor me. But, you know, dragon fruit being a natural, that's pretty tasty. I'd be willing to be sponsored by that one. Oh, just had an idea for illusory damage. I believe you mean illusionary damage. Well, no, illusory might be right. When you said you'd keep some due to shocks to the system, I think I'll have the characters roll system shock survival if and when they get killed by phantom damage. Failure meaning they do suffer cardiac arrest and die for real. I like the idea. We're going to talk more about illusions a little later. Somebody else had something to say about it. And further about illusions, would illusionists or gnomes who have a natural knack for illusions have a better chance of surviving attacks from illusions? Absolutely. Pardon me? Didn't even follow my own advice. Ooh. Not like a cramp in the chest from sneezing. Trying to be polite. All right. Okay. Phantom damage. All right. Illusions and gnomes. Here, I would refer, when you have questions of this nature, what seems logical in a fantasy setting? I know. But what seems logical? Illusionists would be much more likely to see through another illusionist's spell. They would know the telltale signs. They would be able to look for a telltale sign. Gnomes, naturally more magic resistance already. Certainly they would have a better chance. Certainly. It would just seem to follow the logic of D&D. When in doubt, follow the logic of where the logic seems to follow, the game logic. Not real logic, because none of it's logical. Fireballs aren't logical. If memory serves, you allow spellcasters to cast lower level spells from higher level sites. No, and so I'll stop it here and not read the rest. I only allow clerics that latitude because they're really not spells, they're prayers, the way I handle it. The way it works in my world. I'm much more lenient. Clerics really have the best of all the possible worlds in my world. I don't allow magic users to do that. That would defy the Vancian magic of having to memorize it the night before. Pardon me, I'm still getting a strange cramp in my side from that sneezing away. We got to watch the old man do calisthenics. Won't that be fun? Okay, how big can a miniature be and still be a miniature? What's the cutoff, in my opinion? Well, what's the definition of miniature? Something rendered in a smaller scale. If they made G.I. Joe or He-Man figures are miniatures in that they're made to represent something much, much bigger, much larger. If you had everything you needed for your table in 1 to 72nd scale, those are big boogers. But there's no reason you couldn't do that. Miniature just means not life size. If you had the luxury of a big backyard, I mean a really big backyard, and you could run around with half-size, cast up and cement a bunch of half-size hollow figures, okay, you could have 3 foot tall figures. Miniatures is miniatures. Miniatures become silly when they're too small to see. In certain applications. Now, that's not to say that you can use 7mm or 10mm if you're fighting a Napoleonic battle because you don't need detailed figures. If you're fighting a skirmish battle, you need something that at least approximates what you're trying to say. Now, you can play it with green army men, or you can paint it with fancy painted figures. I don't know, miniature is, smaller. I don't think I'd enjoy playing, if I were to use figures for D&D, I wouldn't play with 15 millimeter. I'd stick around the 25, 28. Personal preference, years and years of doing it at that scale, ease, comfort, whatever. If there were, 54 millimeters that were available, and enough of them in a variety, enough of them, I'd play with, you could play with those. It's really just, anything smaller than life size. Maybe hit points are really fatigue points. Yeah. Call them vitality points. Hit points is just a poor choice of words. At the time, it made sense, but that was before the birth of 3 million rules lawyers and word definers. So, yeah. Talking about Gary's reservations about Magic users taking over the campaign made me think of a fantasy PC game I played in the 80s called Master of Magic, where the magic... Okay. Okay, you're talking about Master of Magic, where they're powerful and never leave their towers. Are you sure that isn't Age of Wonders? Because I've played extensively one called Age of Wonders, where your magic is expressed through your heroes, which are generally leading armies or groups of the scale of the game says that they're units, but it feels much more like they're individuals, and so you can form parties up to 8. I enjoyed the game. It was just a different way to apply magic. Instead of being out there wielding it on the front lines, it's like all the players had a palantir, and they could direct their magic through their various heroes. And there was a limit to it. But I think that I don't know. Maybe there was something called Master Magic. I was thinking of Age of Wonders does the same thing. Okay, back on illusions. I know I'm in the minority, but I've always run that until you know an illusion isn't real, you must treat it like it is. Right, that's the point. If you push on an illusionary wall, you'll feel the wall there. You won't similarly push past it. Of course, it's not the Looney Tunes, and an illusion can't break the fundamental laws of the universe, so you could still fall through an illusory floor, but tapping on it with your pole, it would feel real. My reasoning for this is that the illusion magic doesn't trick your senses, it tricks your brain. Well, okay. Rather than the individual senses, which are part of your brain power. Okay, gotcha. Sounds good. Have you ever seen someone walk through an illusionary wall? Your brain will still think it's real and behave thusly. You would probably get a bonus to disbelieve the illusion in that case, but touch, hearing, and smell serve you no better against an illusionist than sight. I kind of like that. I wouldn't put that sensory aspect in carte blanche at the beginning, but as the illusionists become more adept and higher level, I would definitely not be adverse to looking at modifying spells, however the illusionists in my campaign presented to me. That would then be a total illusion and very hard to see through. I kind of like that idea. Okay, on RPG groups. My rule of thumb for my regular face-to-face group. If I wouldn't do something else with you, like go fishing, have a couple of beers, toss darts, etc., in other words, regular social activity, then I probably don't want to play D&D with you. I have very few people in my life that that I only see when gaming, and they are all people I have been attending conventions with for over a decade. Yes, I absolutely I absolutely see that point of view, and this person that wrote this is a friend of mine who I only get to see once or twice a year at gaming conventions. But yeah, I mean, um, now I'm not saying that you can't put together a game, a campaign at your friendly local game store. You can, and not see those people for anything but gaming. That's highly possible. And of those people, you may find a few that you do want to go fishing with or socialize with or whatever. But the challenge of managing a group as opposed to, tight friends is it's a little more challenging. It's a little more intense. I wouldn't have a group where I kept people that consistently played like a dick. Wouldn't do that. Absolutely not. Okay. Here, see, I've never claimed that I know everything in every one of the books. Never claimed to write anything I didn't write. So here we go back to Keogh Tom's, and this based on Tom Keogh. Ointment, sovereign salve used for drying potions. Okay, fine. Don't use it in my world. We just drink little Red Bull cures, chew herbs occasionally, real herbs, not. I'm not alluding to anything. Fine. I just think that applying this stuff with a blowgun is a bad idea. Personal. On page 5 of Men and Magic, it states under the scope section, the scope need not be restricted to the medieval. It can stretch from prehistoric to the imagined future. End quote. I find this very interesting as it hints the OD&D rules could be used for science fiction games too. Now I know there were elements of science fiction in D&D, City of the Gods, Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, but was there ever a discussion that a full-fledged science fiction game can be conducted using OD&D rules? Well, actually, the guys at Lake Geneva did. I believe that's how Gary's Magic User, and I'm not sure which one it is, but I'm pretty sure that's how Gary's Magic User ended up on the Warden, Jim Ward's Warden, with Jim Ward running the Warden, and is now there for all time because he was never rescued before Gary passed. I'm sure that they mashed stuff together like that. We mashed stuff together like that. I have occasionally, I have occasionally put in, is it sci-fi, is it magic stuff that you could interpret either way. But for the most part, I don't blur the lines all that much. When I do, I don't blur them at all. I make it very obvious that we're genre bending, mashing, when that happens. That's generally where we go. We always said you could take it anywhere you wanted. It's just most people jumped off into the medieval medieval Western European, mainly because of the books that were available. Were all, if not in that period, based on or influenced by that period. But there was, I can recall somebody's game. I'm not sure if I was in it or I remember talking about it because, God, it was so long ago. I don't know, they got time warped or dimension warped or whatever, and they ended up going back into prehistoric times and fighting saber-toothed tigers and cave bears and other really megafauna, if you will. I don't remember dinosaurs, but I certainly remember cave bears, and oh God, yeah, I remember cave bears. Woohoo! I wish I didn't. They're really they're really bad news. Just take the biggest grizzly, like a Kodiak, and add about 3 feet to it, tall and the corresponding width, and make the claws even longer, and you got a cave bear. Whew. Man, certainly had to wipe all them out before they became cavemen. All right. Now this is interesting. How much influence have board games had on your style of DMing? Would you say that your board gaming experiences have informed your DMing of Wheel of Blame, where the layout, that is, the eponymous wheel, resembles a board game to some degree, the tokens, pre-gens? Would you draw similar comparisons to your Carbondale games, or would that fit into a wider scope? All right, Carbondale was purely campaign. Now, it was a directed campaign because there were several times when Gary and I'd be discussing a rules change or a new something or other, and so I would get stuck in the next adventure. However, the Wheel of Blame, I don't see that much relation to board games in the Wheel of Blame. The Wheel of Game, if it suffers from anything, it's a railroad game, because there is no way except forward. And so for that, to that end, it's a terrible railroad, and I try not to write. Otherwise, I don't write railroad adventures where you must go from point A to get to point B, and you can't kill that guy at point B when you reach him because you'll need to meet him at point D. No, I don't do that. If anything, I write too much of a sandbox. But the Wheel of Blame is the Wheel of Blame. Board games are, good grief. I started board games. I discovered Avalon Hill's D-Day when I was in the 6th grade parochial school. So, yeah, I've been board gaming longer than anything else. Now, board wargaming. I came from a house where we played all kinds of games that had boards. So I was predisposed to board games from a very early age. We played Monopoly. We played Finance, which was actually a better version of Monopoly. We played all kinds of TV games and stuff. And when I was really little, and my sibs were really little, Candyland and Snakes and Ladders and stuff. So I've always been comfortable around the table with a board on it. I don't think there's really not a lot of overlap between boards and RPGs in style, in style of play or philosophy. Not that I can see. Boards are cut and dried. They're clear. You must meet this, and this for the victory conditions. When you do combat, it'll, within the range of the dice, always give you a predictable outcome because of combat results tables or whatever. But mostly CRTs, combat results tables. Whereas actually role-playing is the antithesis, because it's just loosey-goosey and you can just do anything. Hey, try this, try that. Yeah, what the hell, why not? Let's see if it works. Roll a die. So in that regard, they're way on the opposite. I keep forgetting. Yeah, go. They're way on the other end. One of these days I'll get used to having a backwards camera. Yeah. Anyway, they're far apart on the spectrum. Role playing can go any direction. there are some board games that have limited elements of role play in them. There are some board games that spoof role play, where the one where you're just running out of there and don't want to be the last guy out because you don't want to be the last guy in line because I get eaten. There's been boards done that spoof role playing, but I don't. I think I had to eschew some of the principles of board gaming to embrace role playing, but I'd already done a little of that in miniatures. In boards, one unit, one chit counter equals so many men in real life, and they move in a very rigid pattern. Then I discovered miniatures where you could move with nuance and curve a little bit, and not just have to march ahead straight in lines or else make an abrupt. Okay, so I started breaking away from the hexagonal grid with minis, and then there's no hexagonal grid whatsoever in D&D. There wasn't then. So I don't believe that, other than the fact that I just like to play games and I like problem solving, and role playing is the biggest form of problem solving there is, whichever side of the screen you're sitting on. That's why I play. I like it for that reason. Good grief. Okay, you wise guys. This'll knock you out because it looks like I answered all the questions. I'm lucky enough that I don't have to address every comment made. Some of them aren't made to be addressed, but rather in response to. Again, it doesn't have to be about something I did talk about. You can always make a comment prompting something in the next episode. I have no idea how short this is going to be. It might be so short I'm embarrassed, but I doubt it. Painting for Black Seas. We played Scoville. Let me talk about Scoville for a minute. Seemingly simple mechanics, seemingly simple gameplay, seemingly simple goals. How hard can it be? You're planting peppers and crossbreeding them. Well, we found out the other night, two game sessions ago, I think for perhaps the very first time, or certainly the first time in well over a year, not even a year plus, anyway, long time, I won it, and I had 124 points. Well, this time we played just a few days ago, and miracle of miracles, I won again with 70 points. So a dynamic of this game that we had never noticed that actually makes you play differently when this happens. Part of this game is growing peppers and selling them in various methods, and part of it is collecting peppers of certain types and numbers to fulfill a chili recipe, which is worth increasingly anywhere from 3 to 24 victory points. Of course, the 24 pointers need a lot of high-end peppers. Well, from this game, we got a slew of low-paying chili recipes and hardly any high ones. And we were kind of like, oh, this game's going to be different. And I didn't realize I had won until we counted off at the end. I thought I hadn't done that well because I knew I didn't have nearly as many points as the week before. Point being that Scoville and its labs extension is a very subtle board game. It's relatively easy to play. You usually play it out in under 2 hours, hour and a half. It depends on how many you got playing. But I find it interesting that here's a game we've played, and all of a sudden, this occurrence of all the low-value chili recipes being the only ones available, and the whole dynamic of the game shifted. Now you're into selling peppers, you're into getting victory points in other ways. It's interesting. It's why I keep playing board games. Every time you get a new something or other, it's like playing it for the first time again. And I guess this week I'll go back to painting. I'll be out on the East Coast in February. I don't know yet about Madison. Still waiting to hear on Madison for Game Hole. And I'll be running next weekend. I'll be running some games for North Texas RPG Con. And for those of you perhaps haven't heard, the guy that runs North Texas and puts it, funds it, his pockets, just went back into the hospital, had emergency surgery again, and likely to be on bed rest for a couple of months. And he's in all our thoughts and prayers. We're pulling for you, Doug. We're pulling for you. And on that unhappy note, I'll bid you a fond farewell and say, do-da-da go. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Called in Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Tight with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.